The people of Queens, New York come from all over the world, seeking a new way of life with opportunities for a better life for them and their children. While they eventually get caught up in the busy lifestyle of the Big Apple, they each yearn for a taste of their own homelands. The Queen's Digest magazine continues to write about stories from the homelands of these different people from different places, talking about things they understand and feel. We will be discussing stories from the Caribbean, including Guyana, from Central and South America, and many countries in Europe. We will learn about these different people who are now our neighbors, schoolmates, workmates, and the people from whom we buy our groceries too. So sit back and let's find out about the people who came and continue to come to Queens, New York. Did you know that the original peoples of Guyana and the Caribbean are called Amerindians? Did you also know that they are the direct descendants of nomadic tribes who came to this region from Siberia, perhaps as far back as 20,000 years ago? Well, yes, they certainly are. These nomads migrated slowly through North America and into Central and South America, and by the 1400s, these first Guyanese were divided into two major groups, the Caribs who inhabited the coastlands and the Arawaks who were mostly found in the interior. It is from these indigenous peoples that we get the word Guyana, which according to Wikipedia, was a word first used to describe the region covering modern Guyana as well as Suriname and French Guiana. But how many of us seek to understand our roots as Guyanese and West Indians? Are we interested in the facts of our history, or just consumed by the violent affairs of the present? Hi there, and welcome to another episode of the Queen's Digest magazine. I am your host Ryan, and today we will take a close look at what it means to be a Guyanese. On this channel, we explore and share the history and culture of the peoples of Queens, New York, more particularly of Guyana and of the greater English-speaking Caribbean. In the distant past, many different people came and stayed in Guyana and in our Caribbean islands, hence the diverse cultures that have blended so well to make us into Guyanese and West Indians. The Europeans came and set up trading and military posts here in the late 15th century, and subsequently Africans and indentured servants from India were brought to Guyana and the Caribbean. Portuguese and Chinese people came too, and we all eventually became Guyanese and West Indian citizens. I see it happening again in Guyana, because these days people from all over are once again coming here. Americans are coming. Haitians are coming, Venezuelans are coming, Brazilians, Chinese, Middle Eastern and African businessmen too, all are heading to Guyana. And why? It's probably due to the recent discovery of vast oil reserves in Guyana's economic zone. This has brought the country into focus on the international scene and also rekindled some rather unwelcome attention. I refer to Venezuela's long-standing claim to the entire Essequibo region. Guyana has declared its intention to await a final resolution on this issue from the International Court of Justice. CARICOM, as you will recall, brokered a meeting between Guyana and Venezuela in 2024. But Venezuela has always displayed a disregard for international laws, preferring instead to rattle its sabers in memory of some long-forgotten halcyon days of glory. Now that should put into a nutshell what is being discussed across some media circles as a brewing war between Guyana and Venezuela. While this is not necessarily the case, it should be a matter of concern to all Guyanese and Caribbean people, here at home and in the diaspora. It was quite interesting to witness the CARICOM brokered meeting in 2024, especially after the weeks of threatening rhetoric from Maduro. But Venezuela continues to display an aggressive attitude in 2025, even to the point of building up its military forces along the border with Guyana. But let us for a moment take a closer look at this situation. But let's suppose for a moment that this continuing drama is not entirely based on what we see, but instead what might not be so apparent. You see, when oil was first discovered around 2015, the initial profit-sharing agreements were distinctly not in favor of Guyana's economic well-being. Our negotiating team at that time was hopelessly incapable of dealing with those really very powerful oil giants. More recently, the current government has sought to rewrite those agreements to make them more profitable for Guyana, but this might not sit well with some very powerful people. And now, with more sensible agreements in place, and with the money flowing, as they say, could the political opposition in Guyana see this as the time to seize the coffers of Guyana? Could it be that all this has caused one or two of those powerful oil companies to move a few pieces around the chessboard of world politics to influence certain recent developments? If such covert underhand developments were intended to quell the desire of Guyanese to seek a more equitable share of the oil revenue, then I don't think the Guyanese government intends to buckle. And Guyanese people should certainly not be afraid or feel unprotected, but should try to understand the seriousness of this situation and know that we must come together to face it. More recent events in Guyana, like police-involved killings, and the now infamous case of the child that drowned, have triggered protests of violence that put the country at risk of losing its way forward. Political leaders need to consider all the risks involved when they present a disunited Guyana. Everyone suffers when foreign forces take over. Now it is not our intention to create fear or dissent, but to discuss our heritage, our identities as Guyanese and Caribbean people, and to awaken a sense of pride and responsibility in recognizing that heritage and identity. Therefore, I think it is wise to know that the Venezuelan government is always ready to pounce on any opportunity to fire up their people with the idea of claiming the Essequibo. If we follow the news, we would see that most of the immigrants being deported as criminals from the US are Venezuelans. Many of these poor people have actually moved to Guyana, where they have managed to gain some dignity after decades of suffering in their own country. But a very sharp eye must be kept on these people. They could very well turn out to be the enemies within. Certain political leaders might even consider using them to foment even more violence to push for political gains. Guyanese people need to be very vigilant. So, it is not hard to see why Maduro finds it convenient to revamp the bogus claim in order to cover up his failure to make a good life for the people of Venezuela. And the now politically backed violence in Guyana will surely give him encouragement to invade Guyana's territory. Guyanese people need to awaken to the fact that any aggressor won't see us as Indo or Afro people. Unless we reinvent ourselves as Guyanese, we will be the losers in any kind of conflict. Now, let's take a closer look at the Guyana-Venezuela border issue, shall we? On the 17th of February, 1966, the PNCUF coalition government jointly signed the Geneva Agreement with the Venezuelan and British governments and created a mixed Guyana-Venezuela commission. This agreement now put the burden of dealing with the issue squarely upon the shoulders of the young Guyanese nation. This also conceded recognition of the spurious Venezuelan territorial claims. What had been a closed case since 1899 was now reopened. This agreement was between Venezuela and the United Kingdom, along with then British Guyana. It presumably sought to resolve the perceived controversy between Venezuela and the United Kingdom of Great Britain over the frontier between Venezuela and British Guyana. Let me repeat that. The agreement presumably sought to resolve the perceived controversy between Venezuela and the United Kingdom of Great Britain, not an independent Guyana. This treaty was signed in Geneva, Switzerland, and became known as the Geneva Agreement. Long before that, back in 1899, a declaration was signed by the Paris Tribunal of Arbitration which awarded the Essequibo region to Great Britain. Subsequently, Venezuela, upon becoming independent from Spain, claimed that this Paris tribunal was null and void. Venezuela, over the many decades after its independence, has continued to voice its dissent over the Paris tribunal, as it suited the political needs of the governing party of the day. The Geneva Agreement of 1966 sought to outline the steps to be taken to resolve the controversy between Venezuela and the United Kingdom, arising from Venezuela's contention that the Paris tribunal was null and void. The Geneva Agreement of 1966 has now become the most valuable document for Venezuela in the negotiation process with now independent Guyana. However, Venezuela actually realizes that this agreement lacks some of the concrete elements required to allow them to legally recover any territory from Guyana. And so, because of the conflicts between Venezuela's position and the factual realities of the treaty, Venezuela are not in a legally good position. The terms of the 1966 Geneva Agreement contain several points that harm Venezuela's position, and some of these are: Number 1. The agreement allows for the parties concerned to find a practical agreement for a satisfactory solution to the controversy, but this has proven to be infeasible in actual practice. Number 2. The United Kingdom was permitted to handle the territory dispute through a colony it had control over, instead of interacting with Venezuela directly, and so, independent Guyana should never have been a party to this agreement, since the controversy was originally between Venezuela and Great Britain. Number 3. Venezuela did agree to allow the colony of British Guyana to become independent from the United Kingdom without requiring a solution to the border problem first. British Guyana was allowed to become a state, which led to it carrying more weight in the conflict. This now means that Venezuela will have to negotiate with a country that had inherited the problem from its colonizers, rather than with the country that had created the problem itself. This puts Venezuela in the position of being the aggressor and Guyana of being a victim. Number 4. So now, the relative perceptions of the two countries have been switched. Venezuela is no longer perceived as the weak nation, usurped by the colonial power of the United Kingdom. Instead, now the poor and newly independent Guyana appears to be the weak nation, being preyed on by a rich country trying to take away part of its territory. All of this presents a whole lot of problems for Venezuela. It is highly unlikely that Guyana will give Venezuela 3/4 of the territory which it has controlled and administered since the time of its independence. In addition, when British Guyana declared itself an independent nation 3 months after the Geneva Agreement, Venezuela would have had to immediately recognize its independence as a result of the agreement. This then put Venezuela in a bad position, for it did not press for a resolution to the issue with the United Kingdom first, which it should have. In spite of its failure to settle the matter first, it chose not to do so but now continues its claims to sovereignty over the Essequibo. Guyanese were and continue to be well educated. We have traveled abroad and made a good living in many different places. We are peace-loving, except at elections time. However, we must continue to believe in ourselves if we are to survive in this ever-changing world with its constantly emerging challenges. In order for us to understand our identity as Guyanese, we need to study our past and to rediscover our heritage. I am very proud to be known as a Guyanese and by extension, a West Indian. But how do some of us see ourselves? As Guyanese, or as Africans? Or Indians? Take a careful look around and observe what is happening in today's Guyana. Many strangers are coming into Guyana and in time will become Guyanese citizens, and they will feel a certain sense of pride when they do. But what about us who were born in Guyana? Do we identify as Guyanese? Or do we prefer to be called Indians, Africans, Afro, or Indo-Guyanese? As a good example, let's take a look at the Guyanese president. This man is the embodiment of everything I always imagined a true Guyanese to be. He is educated and road smart at the same time, nobody pushes him around, and he appears to take nonsense from no one, including Maduro. He impresses me as being cultured, mature and wise for his age, reminds me of both Forbes Burnham and Cheddi Jugan, two past presidents. This president is well-spoken and confidently addresses crowds of his countrymen and is equally at ease with international heads of state, holding his ground in either circumstance. He is cool and suave without being flamboyant, firm, direct and honest, and I believe he has won the respect of those in his own government, including the opposition, as well as the heads of state in CARICOM and other esteemed bodies. A true Guyanese, I say, a real homeboy. Let's look at this man who is showing good leadership and try to emulate him when we declare ourselves as Guyanese. So, are you Guyanese? Or Indian? African? Indo-Guyanese? Afro-Guyanese? These are questions that each of us in Guyana must ask ourselves. Will we continue to be caught up in riots, arson, looting and the same disgusting behaviors that we have indulged in since the early 1960s, or will we choose to become better citizens? Guyanese people need to face the truth about themselves because the Venezuelans are approaching our front door and getting ready to smash it down. Well, there you have it, today's episode of the Queen's Digest magazine. Let us know what you think about the issues raised in today's episode. Should we allow Maduro to invade? Is the recent spate of violence in Guyana being politically motivated? What are some solutions to ensuring peaceful elections in Guyana? Are Guyanese people aware of the threat of an invasion from Venezuelan forces? How does what is happening in Guyana right now affect the lives of Guyanese living in Queens, New York and other places? Thank you for joining us. If you haven't already, please consider subscribing to our channel. You might also want to share our content with others. Do join in the conversation, but please keep it peaceful and respectful. Remember that we are trying to have a discussion here, not a violent protest. Do join us for the next episode of the Queen's Digest magazine. Goodbye for now.